The DMV office was an absolute nightmare that day. The line stretched out the door, and everyone seemed to be on edge. I felt like I'd been waiting forever, even though it had only been a couple of hours. I glanced at the clock and sighed. Another hour before lunch, and it didn't look like I'd be getting to the counter anytime soon. I shuffled forward a step, fanning myself with my registration papers. The air conditioner was on the fritz again, and the stale, hot air was almost unbearable. People were shifting uncomfortably, muttering under their breaths. It was a sea of impatient faces, seniors, migrant workers, young mothers with crying children, all looking weary and frustrated. As I inched forward, I noticed an older man in a worn, military-style jacket. He stood out among the crowd, not just because of his height and broad shoulders, but because of the large burn scar that covered half his face. His clothes were clean but shabby, and he kept glancing nervously at his watch. I overheard him tell someone that he was a veteran, Francis Keith, and had come a long way to update his driver's license photo. Goldie and Ray, the two clerks notorious for their terrible attitudes, strutted out from behind the counter. Goldie, with her bright red nails tapping impatiently, and Ray, looking bored out of his mind, started closing their stations. It was still a few minutes before lunch break, but they didn't seem to care. Francis stepped forward, desperation evident in his voice. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said, directing his plea to Goldie. "I've been waiting since this morning. Can you please help me before you go?" Goldie didn't even bother to hide her disdain. She sneered, her red lips curling. "We're closed for lunch, old man. Come back later." Francis tried again, his voice trembling slightly. "Please, my mother is sick. I need to catch the last bus back to my village. It's just a quick photo update." Ray laughed, a cold, mocking sound. "You think we care about your bus schedule? Get lost and come back after lunch." The security guard, looking embarrassed but resolute, grabbed Francis by the arm and started pushing him toward the door. "Sorry, sir, you need to leave," he said, clearly uncomfortable with the situation but too afraid to lose his job. Francis struggled, his voice rising in panic. "Please, I can't come back. My mother, she's waiting for me." "You don't understand." Goldie cut him off, rolling her eyes dramatically. "Oh, spare us the sob story. You're not the only one with problems, okay? Now get out before I call the cops." The security guard tightened his grip, forcing Francis out the door. The older man stumbled, nearly losing his balance, but managed to catch himself at the last moment. The guard shut the door behind him with a loud click, locking it. I felt a surge of anger and shame as I watched Francis being humiliated and forced out. It wasn't right. Someone needed to do something, but everyone, including me, just stood there in silent complicity. I glanced around, hoping someone else would step up, but no one did. The room buzzed with whispers and uncomfortable glances, but no one moved. Goldie turned back to her desk, her eyes scanning the room with a smirk. "All right, folks, we're on lunch break. Be back in an hour," she announced, her voice dripping with false cheerfulness. Ray stretched and yawned, clearly indifferent to the scene that had just played out. "Let's get some food, Goldie. I'm starving." As they walked away, I could feel the collective frustration and anger in the room. But more than that, I felt my own resolve harden. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The room was still buzzing with tension when Goldie and Ray strutted out for their lunch break, their smug faces disappearing behind the closing door. I took a deep breath, trying to steady the turmoil in my chest. This wasn't right. Francis Keith deserved better than to be thrown out like that, especially after serving our country. I couldn't just stand by and do nothing. Ignoring the disapproving looks from my colleagues, I bolted from behind my desk and hurried out the door. The harsh sunlight made me squint as I scanned the parking lot, quickly spotting Francis. He was leaning against a lamppost, head bowed, looking defeated. "Wait!" I called out, rushing towards him. He looked up, surprise and a flicker of hope in his eyes. "Please, come back inside." "I'll help you," I said, my voice firm despite the nervous fluttering in my chest. He hesitated, then nodded, following me back into the office. As we re-entered, the few remaining clerks stared at us, their expressions a mix of curiosity and disapproval. I led Francis to my station, feeling their eyes boring into my back. Goldie and Ray's desks were empty, their personal items strewn carelessly about. I could almost hear Goldie's voice in my head, scolding me for helping Francis. I pushed the thought aside and focused on the task at hand. "Thank you, miss," Francis said quietly as he sat down, his voice heavy with gratitude. "I don't mean to be a bother. It's no bother at all, Mr. Keith," I interrupted, smiling reassuringly. "I'm sorry for how you were treated. Let's get this sorted out so you can catch your bus." I quickly pulled up his file on the computer, taking his new photo and updating his information. As I worked, I could feel the tension in the room, but I focused on Francis, who seemed to relax a bit as I helped him. "Why are you doing this?" he asked, his voice low and filled with genuine curiosity. "Your colleagues. They don't seem to care." I paused, meeting his eyes. "Because it's the right thing to do," I replied simply. "Everyone deserves to be treated with respect. Especially someone who's served our country." Francis nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "You're a good person, miss. Not many would go out of their way like this." As I handed him his new license, I noticed the lines of worry easing on his face. "Here you go," I said, smiling. "You're all set." He looked at the license, then back at me, his eyes shining with gratitude. "Thank you, Miss Maddie. You don't know how much this means to me." "It's my pleasure, Mr. Keith," I replied. "Safe travels, and I hope your mother feels better soon." Francis stood, tucking the license carefully into his pocket. He paused, then extended his hand. I shook it firmly, feeling a sense of connection and understanding pass between us. "God bless you, Maddie," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You've restored my faith in people today." I watched as he walked out the door, his posture a little straighter, his steps a little lighter. I returned to my desk, feeling a mix of pride and apprehension. I knew there would be consequences for defying Goldie and Ray, but I didn't care. I had done the right thing, and that was all that mattered. As the lunch break ended, Goldie and Ray returned, their faces flushed with annoyance as they saw me at my station. Goldie's eyes narrowed, and she stalked over to me. "Maddie, what do you think you're doing?" she hissed, her voice low but venomous. "Helping every sad sack that comes in here? You'll never finish all your work." I met her glare, unflinching. Someone had to help him, Goldie. It was the right thing to do. Ray snorted, shaking his head. "You're going to regret this, Maddie. Just you wait." I ignored them, turning back to my computer. I had made my choice, and I would stand by it, no matter what. The days following the incident with Francis Keith were tense. The office buzzed with whispers and rumors about what might happen next. I kept my head down, doing my work diligently, but I could feel the weight of my colleagues' eyes on me. Goldie and Ray, especially, were not pleased. Their disapproving glares and snide comments followed me everywhere. "Enjoying your little act of heroism, Maddie?" Goldie sneered one morning as she passed my desk. I hope it was worth it. I didn't respond, keeping my focus on the paperwork in front of me. I knew better than to engage with her. Still, I couldn't help but worry about the consequences. Goldie and Ray had been at the DMV for years and had friends in high places. I was just a young clerk, new to the job and without any real connections. A week after the incident, the atmosphere in the office changed dramatically. The usual hum of mundane tasks was interrupted by a sudden hush. I looked up to see the city mayor, Mr. Livingston, walking in with his entourage. He was a tall, imposing figure, known for his no-nonsense attitude. "Good morning," Mr. Livingston announced, his voice carrying an authority that commanded attention. "I'm here to address a serious matter." Goldie and Ray, who had been gossiping at the water cooler, froze. Their faces paled as they exchanged worried glances. The mayor's presence could only mean one thing: repercussions. "Goldie Monroe and Ray Thompson, please step forward," the mayor called out, his tone leaving no room for argument. The two clerks hesitated, then reluctantly moved towards the front of the room. Goldie's confident demeanor faltered, and Ray looked like he wished he could disappear. "I've received a formal complaint regarding your behavior towards Mr. Francis Keith, a decorated war hero," Mr. Livingston continued, his eyes narrowing. "Your actions were not only disrespectful but completely unacceptable." Goldie opened her mouth to protest, but the mayor held up a hand, silencing her. "Save your excuses. I've reviewed the security footage and spoken to witnesses. Your conduct is inexcusable." Ray shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting around the room as if looking for an escape. Goldie, on the other hand, seemed to gather herself, a look of defiance crossing her face. "We're understaffed and overworked," she argued. "You have no idea what it's like dealing with these people every day." The mayor's expression hardened. "That is no excuse for mistreating anyone, let alone a veteran who has served our country. Effective immediately, you are both terminated." A collective gasp echoed through the office. Goldie and Ray stood there, stunned. The mayor motioned for security, and the two clerks were escorted out, their protests falling on deaf ears. Once they were gone, Mr. Livingston turned his attention to me. "Maddie, step forward, please." I stood up, my heart pounding in my chest. I walked to the front, feeling every pair of eyes on me. "I've heard about your actions, Maddie," the mayor said, his tone softer now. "You showed compassion and professionalism in a difficult situation. We need more people like you in public service." I felt a blush creep up my cheeks as he continued, "I'm promoting you to head of the DMV office. I expect you to lead by example and make this place more efficient and customer-friendly." I was stunned, barely able to process his words. "Thank you, sir. I'll do my best," I managed to say. The mayor nodded. "I believe you will. Congratulations, Maddie." As he left, the office erupted in a mix of applause and murmurs. My coworkers started to congratulate me, and I felt a mix of pride and relief. I had done the right thing, and it had paid off in ways I never expected. Later that day, as I settled into my new role, my thoughts kept drifting back to Francis Keith. His humility and gratitude had left a lasting impression on me. I knew I wanted to lead with the same kindness and respect I had shown him. In the following weeks, I made several changes to the office. I implemented a new system to reduce wait times, reorganized the staff's schedule to ensure better coverage, and introduced a customer feedback program. The changes were met with enthusiasm from both the staff and the public. The DMV began to transform into a more efficient and welcoming place. One afternoon, while I was going over some paperwork, a familiar figure walked into the office. It was Francis Keith. He looked much more at ease than the last time I saw him. "Hello, Maddie," he greeted, a warm smile on his face. "I just wanted to stop by and thank you again. You've made a real difference here." "Mr. Keith, it's so good to see you," I replied, shaking his hand. "And please, call me Maddie. I'm just glad I could help." He nodded, looking around the office. "You've done a wonderful job. This place feels completely different." "Thank you," I said, feeling a swell of pride. "It's been a team effort, really. But your situation opened my eyes to how much we needed to change." Francis smiled, a hint of sadness in his eyes. "You know, I never expected any of this. I just needed to get my license updated. But your kindness set off a chain of events I couldn't have imagined." "It was the least I could do," I replied. "Everyone deserves to be treated with respect, especially someone who's given so much for our country." Francis's eyes shimmered with gratitude. "You're a good person, Maddie." "Thank you." As he left, I felt a deep sense of fulfillment. I knew I had made a difference, not just for Francis, but for everyone who walked through the doors of the DMV. And that, I realized, was the true reward. If you like this story, please subscribe, like, click the bell, and leave a comment. Thank you in advance.